right, before the season began, we talked a little Rutgers football with Bobby Darin from the Scarlet Nation, and he joins us now. Very optimistic coming into the season. Now 4-0, headed to Lincoln, and Bobby joins us now. Good morning, Bobby.
Hey, how you doing? I like the music.
Thank you. Thank you. We're a sports slash big band station. It's actually a unique combo out here in the Midwest. It's, you know what? The Fan has their niche. The Zone has their niche.
And Bobby, on Saturday mornings, get ready for Polka Power because we also have a polka audience too.
And that reference gets lost the older I get. I used to hear it all the time at school, and now it's kind of, I really appreciate it when I hear it.
We had a listener suggested during the break, so I couldn't let him down.
There you go.
I appreciate it.
4-0 in the way that 4-0 has been assembled. Surprised, not surprised? Your reaction to this start that Greg Schiano and Rutgers has had in 24?
I'm not surprised, but, I said from the beginning of the year, a lot of these games are going to be, decided by a razor-thin margin. So it wouldn't have surprised me if they were 2-2 or 4-0 because, these were close games. Rutgers really had the Virginia Tech game in hand and then kind of, just went to sleep on defense and allowed 16 points. It was 23-7, and they were going in for a score, missed the fourth and goal. They're ready to blow it open, and then they come roaring back. But I don't think Rutgers is at the point where they can go into these games, control them from start to finish. They're going to need some breaks. They're going to need the opponents to make some mistakes. And they play smart, disciplined football. So they play tough football. But, again, looking at the head of this game, I think it'll be the same thing. It'll be a tight game. And, it might come down to a few breaks or a few bounces going one way or the other.
The one area that you had brought up to us when we talked last, and that was optimism around Ethan Kaliakmanis. We know he had some inconsistencies in Minnesota. It was a little bit more careless with the football at times, but there's definitely some athleticism there. He's cut down on the turnovers. He seems to be sort of an X factor next to Monangai when teams try to sell out. What has it been about him so far that you've seen where he has been a lot more steady, a lot more consistent than what we remember at Minnesota?
But they're not asking him to do too much. Asking him to be a game manager who can not make mistakes and make some throws here and there. And Kirk Soraka's done a really good job of play calling and making it easy for him. And they have better receivers this year. It's no secret the Rutgers passing game has just been in the dark for a long time. And, he's kind of given it life. And he's not spectacular, but he's making the throws that, the shorter throws, the out routes, the over the middle. This the throws that you expect a Big Ten quarterback to make, and Rutgers hasn't had that. So they're able to mix that in and move the ball without having to rely solely on the run. Kaliakmanis is not going to wow you with big plays, with big numbers, but he's efficient, and he's playing very smart football.
Bobby Deren joining us here on Mornings with Sharp and Hanley. If I describe Rutgers' defense as bend, don't break, would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, that would be really. That's kind of what it's been this year, and you can see it by the yardage they've given up. Last year, they finished 16th in the nation in total defense. They bring a lot of guys back, but it doesn't feel like it has the same mojo where it was a lot stronger last year. They are making plays when they need to keep teams out of the end zone. They're making some, creating some turnovers, not a ton, but they're making the plays when they need to, and you look at it, and at one point you say, well, they're doing a good job. At another point you're saying, well, sooner or later, if they don't tighten it up a little bit, it could be ugly. But, they started two new linebackers, which was a big difference. Tyreen Powell is making his way back from an Achilles injury, so he'll be back again this week, but he's still working out the kinks. So I think they were a little vulnerable over the middle with two young linebackers that never started before.
The other part, when we kind of look at the season that has happened for Rutgers, and you brought up not making mistakes. Gary talks about it too. We've talked about this thing back and forth of what's going to give. And when you look at the red zone defense, and that Washington game was a perfect example, how much of it is what you're seeing from what Rutgers is doing defensively as opposed to teams maybe kind of shooting themselves in the foot a little bit and looking at how Nebraska would want to attack? What do you like about what they're doing in the red zone, but also what might be there for teams in the red zone?
The field gets shorter, so that they're not, you don't have the ability to let up the big plays, but it's just a veteran team, and they just seem to play better in their fits and their. Last week, against Washington, I mentioned Tyrene Powell. He's a 6'5" linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
Washington had a pass that would have went for a touchdown, but he got up and just disrupted the pass so much that it went over their head. So you have guys like that able to make some more plays down in the red zone, and I don't think there's one thing I can point to really say, well, they're going to do this in the red zone. They just tighten up down there and just play better defense. I don't know if it's a shorter field, guys step up and make some plays, but that's been a key to this season. And I think you'll look at them and it's kind of like no set formula for success. But I do think if Nebraska can run the ball, Rutgers will be susceptible down in that red zone. So I think the defensive line is going to have to tighten things up. That's not a unit that's been prolific this season, not getting a lot of sacks. The front four doesn't have a consistent pass rush. So that's an area I would really focus on.
Nebraska hasn't given up a rushing touchdown. Rutgers has got one of the best running backs, not only in the Big Ten, but also in the country. For Monangai, Bobby, what's a magic number for the Rutgers side? If get to amount of carries or amount of yards where you can say, if you get there, man, we got a good chance of getting on that plane going back to New Jersey being 5-0.
Well, he's carrying a little over 24 carries a game, and you look at his numbers and you go, wow, the offensive line must be clearing holes. They're not clearing massive holes. He's getting a lot of yards after contact. I don't know if there's one magic number because they're going to keep feeding him, and he's the type of guy who can pop one, whether he's bouncing outside, running through tackles. I just think as opposed to a magic number, he'll have to be consistent with moving the chains. Whether they're going to run him a lot. I think you'll see him over 20 carries. So they're going to keep going to that. But I think more importantly, you look at, the first downs, how many they're able to accrue over the course of the game. And that's going to be the one because they're just going to keep feeding them. Now, if he goes over 100, it'll be good for Rutgers. But, that might be skewed because, if you give him the ball, 25 to 30 times and he gets 100 yards, I mean, it might look impressive, but, it's not going to be a lot of big gainers in there.
And where does Samuel Brown come in on all this too, with taking a little bit of the load off Monangai and what they would like to, how they would like to use Samuel Brown? Because we saw him in some good spots against Washington where there clearly looks like there's something there with him too.
Well, 2 years ago, he took Monangai's starting job, and his first game as a starter, he was playing against Indiana, went over 100 yards in the third quarter, but he got hurt that game. And it took him a whole year to really recover. He had major foot surgery. And he's really just now getting back to the form that he showed as that true freshman. He's a big running back, about 225, and he's a very patient runner, really good athlete, was a really good high school basketball player, so he has great athleticism, but he has power, and I think he could be efficient against Nebraska because if there's not a lot of room to run, he can kind of create it because he's so powerful. But he's a guy, if he doesn't get hurt 2 years ago, we might not be talking about Kyle Monangai right now because Monangai really stepped up last year when Brown was still trying to figure things out and get back, and he just wasn't his old self. And now you're starting to see that. So you really have a nice 1-2 punch. But he's a guy that moves the pile. So being as though Rutgers is facing a really good Nebraska defensive front, I could see Brown getting more carries this week, sharing the load a little more with Kyle because he's a guy who can move the pile.
Bobby, as always, we appreciate it. By the way, you were on with some good friends of ours the other night on Big Red Wrap-Up. Look good. We always appreciate your time, my friend.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
That's Bobby Deren. You can follow Bobby is on Twitter. He runs the Scarlet Nation, the 24/7 spot for Rutgers.